Another is a series written by Naoyuki Uchida, first released in 2009 under the pen name Yukito Atsuyuji. Yukito has a passion for detective novels, with his first novel, The Decagon House Murders, spawning a series of elaborate house-related murder mysteries, aptly titled the House series. Along with Whisper, Murder Equation, Homicidal Maniac, and various other one-shot novels and short stories, Yukito is considered a classic author of Japanese detective stories. However, Another is not a detective fiction. It's a supernatural mystery. Another is the story of Koichi Sakakibara and his unfortunate transfer to Class 3 at Yomiyama North Middle School, deep in the Japanese countryside, far away from his home in Tokyo. His arrival also happens to coincide with the appearance of a mysterious ghost girl named Mei Misaki, as well as a series of fatal accidents that are claiming the lives of his classmates and their family, all centering around the sudden death of a student from 1972. A student named Misaki. So, Misaki was this incredibly popular and beloved student. Their death deeply affected everyone in Class 3. But instead of just accepting their loss and moving on, the students of Class 3 just decided that Misaki didn't die. The class would pretend that they were still alive. They would talk to an empty chair. They would joke around with thin air. They would go home with no one. Misaki went on to graduate along with the rest of Class 3, and in their final photo that Class 3 took together, Misaki appeared alongside everyone else. Little did Class 3 know that denying Misaki's death, denying the truth of what happened, would lead to fatal consequences. The next year, Misaki would return to Class 3.
Pause here. It was actually Misaki's younger brother who came back the following year. He died alongside the rest of Misaki's family when Misaki did in a meteorite strike, actually, funnily enough. Either that or a house fire. They say it's one of the two.
Not as a ghost, but as flesh and blood. Their presence inviting death into Class 3 through a series of elaborate accidents that would claim the lives of the students and their relatives. It's guaranteed that at least one person will die every month until graduation. And this cycle would continue. Every year there was a chance that Class 3 would just have one extra student, the student being a victim of an accident a previous year. Reality itself twisting and perverting everyone's perception and memories to make it seem like this person was always meant to be there, once again drawing Class 3 closer to death and plaguing them with gruesome accidents.
There's a reason why we don't run with umbrellas anymore.
In 2010 it was adapted into a manga, and in 2012 an anime and a movie, with a sequel written from 2014 to 2020 titled Another 2001. And if that sounds interesting, go watch it or read it, either one is fine. I'm going to spoil all of them, mostly Another and Another 2001, mostly the novels. And after reading and watching all of them, I couldn't help but think, why is it called Another? You have to admit it's a really odd name. The Decagon House Murders is about murders in a decagon-shaped house. That makes sense. So what does Another refer to? Another what? If you take it at the surface level, you could say that it's due to there being another student in class, the dead one, the casualty as they're referred to. Or you could say it's due to another person dying, because a lot of people die, I think, like especially in the anime, like twice as many people die than in the book. But I don't think those are very satisfying answers. I think Another is more than just anime Final Destination. So this is what I think. Another is about the loss of identity and the suffering caused by it. Imagine you woke up one day and went about your usual routine. You ate breakfast, you got dressed, and you went to school. But when you stepped into your classroom, you could tell the atmosphere suddenly changed. People are whispering to each other about you. They start treating you differently, calling you by new names, asking you weird questions that you don't know the answer to. It's like they're talking to someone else, who just happens to be sitting where you are. Through no fault of your own, you've been changed. You've become another person. The rejection of your true self by your peers causes an inane amount of stress on you,
Eventually triggering primary spontaneous neurothorax and sending you to the hospital for a few weeks. You never know, it might happen.
If you've only seen the anime, what I said probably sounded a bit odd. I mean, it's just an anime about teens dying, right? Well, you're wrong, friendo. This theme is far more prominent in the novel. For instance, during my summary of the Legend of Misaki, you probably noticed that I avoided referring to Misaki as a boy or a girl, even though the anime clearly refers to Misaki as a girl. This is because, according to the novel, no one is actually too sure about anything. They don't know Misaki's gender, they don't know if they were a student in 1972, they don't know how Misaki died. They don't even know if Misaki is their first or last name. They don't even know if Misaki is their real name. But that doesn't stop people spreading the story. In the 26 years since the story is set, the Legend of Misaki loses a lot of important details. In the novel, there are a few examples of details of stories not being quite accurate, such as the haunted lotus pond that Koichi notes is actually a lily pond, or the fact that the 7 Mysteries of Yomiyama North Middle School is comprised of more than 8 stories. And these are clues of how you should be reading Another. Everything in Another to some degree is a piece of art, or as Sei Hatsuno says in his analysis of Another, an optical illusion. And like art or an illusion, Another encourages you to constantly be twisting your perception to try and see things another way, to question if the stories being told are true or if what you heard was correct, and even if people are who they say they are, because the consequence is tangible and fatal. The threat of Another's world is people making up shit about you, and that made up shit replacing your true self. Both the protagonists, Mei Misaki and Koichi Sakakibara, in their own respect, have had their identities completely taken from them. That little mood-setting scenario I said before is an actual plot point in Another. Koichi one day finds out that he, in a freak coincidence, shares a family name with another 14-year-old called Saito Sakakibara, who happened to have assaulted a bunch of people. This results in Koichi gaining some unwanted attention from his schoolmates, and what started as just childish jokes, as he himself describes, transforms into something worse. To his classmates, he didn't just share a similar name to Saito Sakakibara, they treated him like he was Saito. Koichi told himself that the teasing didn't affect him, and he endured it day after day, until he couldn't anymore, the stress causing his lung to spontaneously collapse and send him to the hospital. Koichi then transferred to Yomiyama to live with his grandmother and regain a semblance of who he was. And I think this was generally left out of the anime and only briefly explored in the novel with Mei Misaki, who resonates with the feeling of having oneself taken from themselves. Born as Mei Fujioka, Mei was taken from her mother and twin sister, Misaki, and given to her bereaved aunt, who recently lost her own child. Why was Mei the one who was given up? It's unclear, but Mei speculates it's just to avoid her twin sister being named Misaki, who lives on Misaki Street. I'm not joking, that's real, that's actually a thing they mention. After finding out her mother isn't who she thought she was, and that her life is just a little bit of a lie, Mei began to see herself as just a substitute for her aunt's dead child, more as a doll than a person, because what happens when the doll breaks? You replace it with a new one. That feeling became more of a reality for her, when a tumour cost her her eye, and then being replaced by a blue doll's eye. Eventually, Mei meets with her twin sister, and the two share secret rendezvous and have fun as sisters do. And for a brief moment, she gets that life that she was meant to have. She gets to be Mei Fujioka, but then her twin dies, along with Mei's last vestiges of her real life, the one that she wanted but was denied. She embraces her isolation and becomes cold and aloof. Her classmates write an entire personality for her, and she becomes Mei Misaki. These are 3 examples of core aspects of someone's identity being changed and denying their true selves. Koichi Sakakibara becoming Saito Sakakibara, Mei Fujioka becoming Mei Misaki, and the student of 1972 becoming Misaki. But keep your eyes open, and this will happen again and again and again. The characters of Another have things added and taken away. Their sense of self is pieced together by other people, until they have become something new with a completely different meaning. And this new person violently rejects the old. Another is showing you that your identity is a sacred and sensitive thing, that the slightest doubt of who you regard yourself as can cause your ego to crumble, and what you're left with is unrecognizable. And within the death of your ego emerges the tragedy of another, not with what you see, but with what you don't, and what is eventually forgotten. The nature of the curse of Misaki means that once the year is over, once the deaths have stopped, everyone will forget. Not that their classmates and their family died, that shit sticks with you. But they'll forget the casualty, the extra students. And although that they were there, the memory of them will begin to fade. My favourite character in Another is Izumi Akazawa. She has a weird role across all the versions of Another. She's practically non-existent in the book, has more of a presence in the manga, and is straight up a main character in the anime. And aside from the manga, Izumi dies. In the book, she's pushed off a balcony, and in the anime, she gets glass crucified. She dies as she lives, clumsily trying to command control over her classmates, as Class 3's tactics officer. As the tactics officer, her role is to try and mitigate the deaths for the year. This is done by just ignoring a random student in class for the year. The logic is that if there's an extra student, you just ignore someone to balance out the amount of kids in the class. It works sometimes. Her headstrong, authoritative nature makes the other students scared of her. The book details how the students wouldn't dare do anything to upset or undermine her. She's a one-dimensional mean girl whose only real contribution to the plot is to yell at Misaki for, honestly, her own incompetence. And now that I think about it, it might be the first time she speaks. In the book, it's the first time she speaks is the end of the second volume, where she dies a few chapters later. And when she dies, Koichi doesn't even bother to confirm. He just thinks that she probably did. Complete with ellipses and a question mark. And you later find out that not even her own brother attended her funeral. That's how much of a nothing Izumi Akazawa was. Then, in Another 2001, she comes back. And she comes across very differently. She's diligent and she takes pride in her work, and she generally cares about the people around her. You learn that she's not a mean girl. She's a 15-year-old who's under a lot of pressure to make sure her classmates don't die. And most surprisingly, we learn a very weirdly specific detail. That she really likes dinosaurs, and she collects little figures of them. And her favourite ones are raptors. And she and her cousin and her cousin's friend talk about it for quite a while. She tells the stories of how her older brother took her to see Jurassic Park when she was far too young. So Izumi pulls out 3 tickets to an advanced screening of the new Jurassic Park movie, and the trio organise a time to go see it together. And I love that little detail because it just encapsulates Another's theme of never knowing the whole picture. And it just humanises a character who we were supposed to hate and just move on. Izumi, this girl, the aggressive feared tactics officer of Class 3, who in some versions straight up tries to murder May and dies screaming for help, the de facto antagonist of Another, thinks velociraptors are cute and wants to go see the new Jurassic Park movie with her friends. And no one will ever know that, because she's not really there. Eventually, Izumi realizes this. She knows that she's the casualty of 2001. And she once again finds herself at the end of her life, deciding to take matters into her own hands, and jumps into a rushing river. Because once the casualty is dead, the curse will stop. And when it stops, people will begin to forget, rendering everything that Izumi did when she was back lost. Her cousin and her friend will eventually forget that the 3 of them organised a trip to the movies, and instead, one of them will just pull out a ticket to an advanced screening of Jurassic Park 3 and say, "Why do I have this?" And the photo the 3 of them took together will just become a photo of 2 of them, and they'll wonder, why did we take this? And Izumi Akazawa will only be remembered as kind of an arsehole who died a few years ago. And that's why I really like Another. Behind all of the gore and death, there's quite a tragic story of people completely losing themselves. But another shows that there's still a chance to come back from that grief and from that fear. At the beginning of another, Mei has resigned herself to always be Mei Masaki. That is, until she met Koichi. As their relationship went on, we saw little bits of Mei Fujioka come back. She might never be the same. She can't reverse what was done to her. She can't get her sister back. But she can come out of that dark place as something new, with another meaning. So there are 4 versions of Another. The book, the manga, the movie, and the anime. All of which are just slightly different from one another. In the book, Mei's doll eye is blue, but in the anime it's green. Izumi dies in the book and in the anime, but she doesn't in the manga, and students and family members appear in some and don't in another. I don't think Mei's twin sister is even mentioned in the movie, and I kind of like that. It's almost as if each version of Another is just a different retelling of the events that happened in 1998. With the real events just being kind of lost to time, just like all the mysteries of Yomiyama North Middle School that Koichi learns in the story. This is absolutely not the intention, but I like to think it is. It's fun. Now that I think about it, I didn't really spoil that much about the plot of Another or Another 2001, so you could probably go read or watch them and still have a good time. The plot and the curse or the phenomenon, it's not a curse. I called it a curse. It's not a curse. They call it a naturally occurring supernatural phenomenon. The explanation is like, imagine you lived in a place that's prone to hurricanes. They just happen to live in an area that's prone to death, and like death season comes when the ex-student shows up. So that they use like an analogy of an umbrella and say like, oh, you can have an umbrella. You can wear an umbrella on your head. But you'll still get your shoes wet or some shit like that. So like, it's not like you're guaranteed to die. It's just accidents are more likely to be fatal and more accidents happen. There are tons of contrivances in Another, but it's still good. And yes, 9/11 does play a pivotal role in Another 2001. Right now, lots of Yukito Atsuji's work is starting to get released officially now in English, so now is a good time to get into his work. Fun fact, this is actually the second time I've made this video. The first one was well over a year ago. It got 1 view and then was immediately copyright struck, and I just never bothered to upload it. So this is like another version of it. That's what I call meta.